Welcome back. We are continuing this conversation with Steven Mosher, one of the members of the Committee on the Present Danger China, one of our duty experts on matters involving the true character of the bully of Asia, as he calls the Chinese Communist Party. A bully worldwide, increasingly indeed. And Steve, I wanted to just sort of move the lens back a bit and focus in on something that you wrote very powerfully about in the New York Post the other day, in which you talked about all of what's known by the locals as East Turkestan becoming essentially a huge open air prison camp. This is, of course, where the Uyghur Muslim minority and other ethnic minorities reside and are being brutalized, indeed genocidally, by the Chinese Communist Party. Tell us what's happening to those people now and give us a sense of the scale on which it is taking place, um, both to them and unfortunately to lots of other Chinese as well.
Well, it's very clear that Xi Jinping, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, has ordered the genocide of the Uyghur people. They are to be extinguished, not just physically, historically, culturally. Their language is to be extinguished. Their existence as a separate people is to be extinguished. And of course, they're being extinguished in a very practical way because Uyghur women are being aborted and sterilized in large numbers, which fits the technical definition of genocide. All right.
Yes.
So we have genocide in real time. That's why Mike Pompeo, in his last day in office back in January, a year before, declared that there was genocide being committed by the Chinese Communist Party leaders in what China calls Xinjiang province. Xinjiang, by the way, means new border. So the very name in Chinese is an admission that this is not historically a part of China. It wasn't part of Ming Dynasty China. It was only part of the Manchu Empire. It was independent until 1949, when somehow all of the Uyghur leaders were killed on a trip to Beijing to negotiate their separate existence as a country, and the Red Army moved in and took it over. So this is historically the Turkish people, Turkish-speaking people who live there, have lived there for thousands of years. China is an imperial power, and this is a colony that it is absorbing. And it is absorbing it in a very brutal way right now. For the last few years, they've set up the largest network of gulags, Gulag network, the Laogai network, as we call it in Chinese, in the history of China. And that's saying something because remember, the Chinese Communist Party is known for its Laogai, is known for its Chinese version of the Gulag. Millions of Uyghur men have been sent to this Chinese Gulag, the Chinese Laogai. Sometimes simply for having a beard that's a little too long because it suggests they may be practicing their Islamic faith, or for sending over their cell phone a greeting in Arabic, which is now illegal and can get you thrown into jail. What happens to the men in the prisons, of course, is that they're immediately tissue typed, blood samples are taken, and if they happen, Frank, to be a tissue match for someone who needs a heart or liver or a kidney, they are executed for their organs. This is forced organ transplantation in China. It's a major business in China. I believe it's a $10 billion a year business.
Wow.
And a lot of the customers come from the Middle East, and they want someone who has had a halal diet. They want someone who's never eaten pork. And guess what? The Uyghur Muslims avoid eating pork. And of course, they are transplant victims for people from the Middle East willing to pay large sums of money for a new heart, new liver, kidney, corneas, you name it. All parts of the
Unfortunately,
body are for sale.
some of these are not necessarily halal donors, involuntary donors. Of course, as you know, Steve Mosher, there's Falun Gong practitioners who are
Right,
being
absolutely.
applied for this purpose as well, and it's just unbelievably horrific, but of a piece with the character of the Chinese Communist Party. And I'm fond of saying, Stephen, your research. Including that you do, of course, at the Population Research Institute, which you founded, documents this to a fairly well. any nation that treats its own people this unspeakably is not going to be charitable towards others. That's for sure. Would you talk a little bit about the social credit system and how it is being utilized to take this kind of Orwellian oppression, uh, localized to some extent, as you've just described, but really to the fullest extent of the nation of China?
Well, China has become a high-tech digital dictatorship. The entire country is a prison camp. We talked about the eastern Turkestan, Xinjiang, being a prison camp for the Uyghurs, where they're gradually being extinguished. But in a very real sense, the entire country has had a high-tech electronic fence erected around it, where people are under watch all the time. And to emphasize the absolute callousness towards human life that the Communist Party has always had in its heart of hearts. I like to quote Chairman Mao Zedong, who said, "It doesn't matter if we kill millions of people, they help to fertilize the ground." Think
Right.
about that. Human beings regarded as nothing more than
Yeah.
perhaps useful
The
fertilizer.
most expedient mistreatment of them for the good of the party and its objectives.
For the good of the
Um,
party leaders,
Steve, when you talk
mostly.
about
So we have in China people being monitored in real time on their cell phones, on their computers. We have people being monitored by surveillance cameras. Of the top 20 cities in the world, in terms of number of surveillance cameras per thousand people, the top 19 are all Chinese cities. The Chinese people are under watch, under surveillance all the time, and not necessarily by human operators, because that would be too much an investment of labor and time. They're under watch by artificial intelligence,
yes,
which China is making great advances in. So that
yeah,
in Beijing today, if you jaywalk, the surveillance camera will take a picture of your face, AI will identify you, and the AI will automatically deduct the fine for jaywalking from your bank account without any human intervention necessary.
right. Um, we talked yesterday with Bill Walton about, I think it was banks in Shanghai that had
Mhm.
frozen the accounts of their customers, and they were being subjected to uh, protests. And the social credit system was used by the Chinese to reach out and essentially shut down those protests by changing the health code on their uh, digital cards from green, meaning they were able to move about, to red, meaning that they were not. This would seem to be of a piece with this larger purpose of the Chinese to control absolutely everybody and and to crush them if need be by denying them access to food or education or travel or whatever else. Right?
Well, it's interesting. I think that a communist party always necessarily has to have an enemy, and it begins with class enemies, but it doesn't stop there. In China, it has moved to ethnic enemies like the Tibetans and the Uyghurs, but it also is now aggressively moving against anyone who has a business that is separate and apart from the government, has opinions that perhaps vary a little bit from the Communist Party opinions propagated by Xi Jinping. Everyone in China has to download a Xi Jinping Strong China app on their phone and has to study the works of Xi Jinping every day for about 20 minutes. And to make sure they have done their daily homework, they have to answer questions on it. It's sort of like a daily Bible study, except they're not studying the Bible. They're studying the works of Xi Jinping.
The
So the
deity
personality
of the
cult.
Chinese Communist Party. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Steve Mosher, we have to leave it at that. I could go on for days with you, and I hope that you'll come back to us again very soon. We so appreciate your expertise and insights and clarity on all of these points. God bless you, my friend, and thanks for the great work you do at the
Thank you.
Population Research Institute. Next up, we're going to speak with Cindy Drukier. She is the host of a terrific program on NTD television, The Nation Speaks. A program she's just introduced on COVID-19 is fascinating. We'll talk with her about that more right after this.